Hello, happy Friday. Welcome back to another edition of Birds of a Feather. No co-ed edition today. My co-ed is exhausted. As you can imagine, the game last night, first game of the year, ended a little later than planned due to weather delay, and it all seemed pointless because it ended up being 24-20 anyway. So my Philadelphia Eagles, the returning champs, Super John champs. Yeah, they won that game last night, barely. But here's the thing, I'm not even going to go on a whole thing about how bad they looked or whatever, because we've been here before. What led to the Super Bowl was how they kind of stumbled and bumbled through the first like five games. So this game was not crisp, but I don't want to hear anybody talking about Jalen Hurts not being a leader. That mother father was all over that field when there was nothing there. I don't feel like he was even hesitating as much as he normally does. Maybe once or twice if there was, but it wasn't noticeable. I think that a lot of the pundits are afraid to really give him total praise because anybody who's outside of the Eagles hub and out of the Eagles fandom know that anytime you give Philadelphia any kind of props, we're expecting to hold you to it. And a lot of these guys want to not be wrong, so they try to act like they really didn't see an improvement in Hurts, but there's a massive improvement in Hurts in the sense that he is focused. He did not let any outside shit, any of the banner hype, any of the Cowboys rivalry hype, just just discombobulate how he was going to operate. Now, whether or not the rest of the team got the same memo, I do not know. Off season had definitely seemed longer, but I only think it seems longer to us due to social media giving you details of every freaking week, where normally we didn't really know much about off season in the past. So it always seemed like, it's whatever. We can't wait till September. Now that we know every cotton picking thing, now you're just feeling like it's been a lot of stalling before the real game actually mattered. So now that it was here, what seemed like was going to be such an exciting, obviously drama filled because it's a rivalry, turned out to be the most deflating balloon after the first 6 seconds of the game. If you didn't pay attention to the game, I don't know how you didn't, because as a true Eagles fan or even somebody who just loves watching football, you realize all the hype that was in the link that night got deflated the minute the refs decided to disqualify and eject Jalen Carter for submitting some bodily fluid from his mouth towards direction of the Cowboys QB Dak Prescott, who now has been shown from another angle guilty of spitting in the same direction, maybe not directly at Mr. Carter, but I think the message was served that he was spitting, and Jalen Carter took it as a disrespectful gesture. So he disrespected back. Here's the thing. At this point, Jalen Carter is now what, year three? I feel like he should know well enough to know that anything to give the Cowboys an inch, they're going to take a yard. You started off wrong. Then the fact that you're no longer on the team for that night, it just killed the vibe. All the excitement, all the audio issues that were happening, I'll talk about that later because that really pissed me off. But just the banner release even was kind of anticlimactic because the sheet didn't really drop the way you wanted it to. And I have to go back and look at how it was for 2018 to see if it was that same kind of feeling. I just know that game in 2018 was such a disappointment, and the Eagles got booed in halftime because they were behind. But this team was actually a point ahead by halftime, and you still kind of felt like there must be more going on behind the scenes because whatever was creating so much like havoc, it seemed like in the first quarter and the second, technically, the defense was all over the place once Jalen Carter was out. So that was obviously going to fuck them up. But it really allowed the Cowboys a chance to run up the field down the field and able to score right away. And shout out to their running back because obviously he knows what the hell he was doing. He took advantage of all the vulnerable spots that some of us probably worried after many of the free agent signings, took that money and went elsewhere. And there is noticeably a gap in the O line as well as the D line. Depth is an issue, but second half it was like nothing happened. Jordan and all the other boys on the D line started to kind of pack those holes in. Landon got replaced, swapped out because I think at this point his back injury is still lingering, and obviously he's recovering from the MCL repair. So Landon is definitely going to be a question mark for at least another couple of weeks. So I don't know if they're going to just make him chill out for like a couple games just so he can fully heal, or if they're going to just put him on a time restraint when he's in there. Knowing Landon, I have a feeling he'll be there. I just don't know if they're going to decide to dress him for the next game because I don't even feel it's worth it for the Chiefs because he's going to get run over. And he was obviously having problems holding, which is probably why there were moments why was forcing himself to run a lot to evade getting sacked. He only got sacked one time, and that was really just a missed assignment. But I also do think that putting Brett Toth in for Landon is never going to suffice as far as a suitable replacement. But let's just be honest, like the whole game was exciting up until Jalen Carter being ejected. And honestly, the only hype that returned was due to Jalen Hurts working his ass off to get the offense back in gear and get the focus back on winning. And he pretty much did it himself. I mean, his stats will say it. A lot of people probably don't think it's a sexy line. I don't care about stats, as you know. I done this thing on audio mostly for this podcast, and I've never cared about stats, whether I look them up or don't. They don't mean anything to me. I just know what my eyes saw. And Hurts was working overtime. Now, I was kind of perturbed because clearly A.J. Brown wasn't a factor at all in this game until the last part of the fourth quarter. He caught a very important first down, as well as Jalen himself took the ball and got a first down so they could just run the ball and run the clock out. Devonta Smith got some catches, but we all know that Devonta, if somebody's on his ass, he's not going to go far. He's still an amazing wide receiver. I do have to keep in mind that both of these wide receivers had issues before training camp as far as, hamstrings or whatever, feet issue, whatever. So a lot of them are probably not going to be in full force probably till week 3 or 4, I would think. Thank God they didn't have to go overseas or anything because I think that would have probably acclimated even more any injuries that are lingering because, now you got to fly, and sometimes that's whether or not you travel with the team or not, that's still going to be a liability when you have to travel and you don't have really a lot of time for rehab, obviously. But obviously, if they're hindered, they probably won't be making the trip. Speaking of Brazil, tonight, YouTube TV is having the Chiefs Chargers game. I might subscribe just because I want to see how the Chiefs have caught up with themselves and hopefully look like the same team before the Eagles beat that ass in New Orleans and maybe look like the old Chiefs, as much as they can. They're going to be without most of their core wide receivers as far as, if not injury and legal situations I know Rashee Rice is going through. So it's important to watch every game as much as possible. If you love football, you're going to. I myself am just interested in just how the Chiefs will look since we played them to see if they've replaced anything or if they just went back to what they were good at or if they tried anything new. Because I know with Andy being our coach for 14 seasons, Andy was not the best adjuster. It wasn't as noticeable as it was when we had the first year of Doug and then obviously Coach Sirianni. So at this point, adjustments are important. I think what I noticed on some of the chatter tonight over the 24-hour period is that a lot of fans are saying that they did not feel, I think even Derek Gunn said it on the Seth Joyner podcast, that he didn't feel like they made any adjustments in the second half. But honestly, the defense didn't let up the second half. So that was obviously the biggest adjustment. Now, offense could be another question, but obviously with the issue of Landon, and then I think even Jordan Mailata starting to look a little tired early because, Dallas has always kind of given them a run for their money, no matter whether Dak was the quarterback or not. It wasn't like it was always an easy out to play Dallas up until last year when Dak was out for another year. So now that he's back, I knew that it was going to be competition, but I didn't expect the very first moment of the freaking game for not only for Ben Van Sumeren to go down again out of nowhere, which sounds like it's an ACL. I don't know what the official injury is, but they already went out and Howie got another D end, Zadarius Smith, who was on the Lions. So that's some depth there. So hopefully, apparently some of the guys that were inactive must not be either good enough or competition enough for Howie to make them active last night. So the fact that there are still some guys that are still inactive and then now they're bringing in Zadarius Smith in means there's competition afoot for some of these guys that have not been able to be subbed in or rotated yet. The thing with Howie I'm learning watching him is that you can always tell when he knows that something is not good enough because the next thing you know, they're talking about they're bringing people in for, a practice or a workout. So Darius Smith came out of freaking nowhere. I don't even think there was a hint that he was going to be looked at. I think most people have been buzzing about Justin Simmons, and so far he's been nowhere. So I don't know if it's knowing Howie, that is a money thing. So I'm sure Justin Simmons is just not interested in being shortchanged, but we also don't know if they've been talking. So I just know that Howie makes stuff work for what it can do. I mean, my co-ed Eddie had just texted me actually before I recorded, and he said that Zadarius had a nice history of sacks and stuff, and they can fit him in the rotation. So if it's good for depth, it's great for the team, regardless, because we already see the vulnerability. Not that people didn't think there wouldn't be issues. Jalen Carter obviously being out didn't help. Now we have to wait to find out how long he's going to be either suspended or fined or what, or if Dak's going to get fined, because they found out later that Dak kind of instigated it. Whether or not he says he didn't, he's not going to probably say that. But I do believe that his action at that point with Van Sumeren on the ground and Jalen Carter thinking he spit in his direction, I would think that they could look at it from both perspectives and see why Jalen overreacted. Yes, it is childish. Yes, it was disgusting. Yes, I wanted to knock him in the head myself. I'm sure many people did. And it just is a bad look for him because he already kind of had a questionable um, rookie scout report based on, the past actions from when he was in Georgia and, the whole drag car racing incident that killed two people. But again, it's one of those situations where do you know where your head's supposed to be at that moment in time? Would it have been easier for him to just walk away and just be like, I know he ain't spitting at me and just walk away? Or was he already fired up that he wanted to start some shit and that was just the right excuse to do it? Or did Dak look for an opportunity to make eye contact with him to get him to like stop looking at me type of thing and just spit? I don't know. Players do spit all the time. I'm not debating that he doesn't spit all the time, whatever. Players do it a lot. It's gross, whatever. But the point is, at this point, you should realize in the game, 3 years, Jalen Carter, do better, be better. That's all we ask because now you're going to be a target for that. We already know this team is going to be a target because they're Super Bowl winners. And at this point now, all the hate and all the slander towards Hurts kind of goes mute in my eyes because I look at it from the perspective of all the things that he lacks that people want him to be as far as a quarterback, a perfect quarterback, should I say. He's either never going to possess or he does it his way. I think his meek and mild approach to me has made everybody realize why he is who he is and how he can still survive and and win a championship by just still being him. The cool, calm, collected Hurts is who he is and who he will always be. And it's helped him survive being benched. It's helped him survive bounced from school to school. It's helped him survive getting drafted in the second round and not the first. So he's always had to go up against some kind of obstacle. So him winning the chip was enough for him to realize, okay, I'm on the right track, but I'm not satisfied. Now, fans outside who just decide they don't think he's still a good quarterback, that's for them to decide, and that's their own thing they want to deal with. That's fine. No one's going to care. It's just don't make it a point to have to point out every little stupid thing that he doesn't do right. Because this game to me last night was, to me, Hurts' cleanest game by himself. I mean, we saw so many games in the past years, in the past 5 years of his career, that there were always glimpses that he can be a winner. I think now he's finally proved it and proving it still. And he's going to have to show it in different ways because there's going to be different ways now that the devil is going to come at you because now you're a target. You're a winner and you just have that target on your back. So every player, including Jalen Carter and Nolan for we got to talk about Nolan taunting because even though taunting is a soft ass penalty, I felt like at that moment he had a kind of a gap in his brain and thought like, yeah, I did it. And then I thought to myself, you can't do that right now. They already looking at y'all crooked from Jalen Carter to now. So why would you linger over a player that's down when this has been the whole problem since the first 6 seconds of this game? So we got to tell Nolan to be better. We got to tell Reed to just shake that off because even though I was guilty of thinking that Reed caused that whole collision, and I did at the time agree with the flag until I realized later that he was trying to pull up and it was just a momentum thing, and you can't really prevent that as a DB from happening. You're going to collide when you're trying to stop somebody in the end zone. And then you just have to think about dumb things like the fact that wasn't even really winning any votes necessarily in training camp. He wasn't really getting the backing in a very assertive way from Vic Fangio. So the fact that he was struggling out there in coverage shouldn't shock anybody. In fact, it kind of made me realize there are times that I was even looking at Slay like he was playing like that. And he probably was, well, not even probably, he was a better cover guy. But the only problem with me was that I always felt like with Slay, there was always a reason why he was either getting hurt or dropping out in the middle of the game. And you'd be like, if your knee was bad, you should have just stayed out the game, bro. Well, like, why are you trying to act like you don't have a bad knee? You have bad knees. He's older. But I do feel like most people asking for Slay. I was like, nah, I was actually more asking for CJ. I miss CJ more for his presence in the middle of the field where Reed was kind of really prospering with CJ there. I think when they started mixing it up before that year, the first time we had CJ, I think you saw how he was kind of being helpful to Reed and to Cooper and to all the other guys at the time, like Avante when he was here. So his presence to me made a difference more than when Slade was, because Slade, he was starting to get to the end of his career, but you do realize as a veteran, he's always going to know where he's supposed to be. And maybe all those other youngins around him sometimes messed up his whole flow, which is why he didn't hesitate to talk about that on his podcast, which annoyed me too. But there are certain things to respect about a veteran player, no matter how you like how they play. People are never going to really like 100% what Hurts does, how he approaches things, but he gets the job done. Slay, when he was here, he did have his returns, he did have his celebrations. He always caused havoc. But at the end of the day, you also have to realize some of the flags they even threw one at Quinyon last night, that I thought was bogus. And I even thought Bennett's flag was kind of stupid too. But they get very ticky tacky about holding and grabbing and stuff like that. But I feel like sometimes those kind of flags, they need to just let them play, because I don't know how else you're going to cover somebody when you're trying to get the ball. I understand grabbing and stuff like that. I understand holding somebody's arm. And obviously that's what Quinyon did on his, but I feel like you still could let some of that shit go. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when they're already on or covering the player, like there's nothing left to do but just swat. But you also need to get that player out of the, way of the ball. I don't know. I mean, I understand DB is hard. I understand cornerback, safety, and all those positions. I mean, I know Sydney, as small as he is, I do think he's just meant for special teams. I do think Healy is just meant for special teams. As much as they want to believe that they probably are big bag and bold and can handle it, there are just some guys who are glaringly just not good enough to sustain a position like that. And no knock on Slay in the sense that I didn't think he was ever a bad player. I just never felt like consistently, because he was getting up there in age, and also just because of his consistent injury issue. So as much as people may respect him as a veteran, I think we all as fans have had our times where we were frustrated with Slay when he would just let somebody in the end zone so easily. And then always seemed like he wanted to blame somebody else on his podcast, which I hated too. Like, it doesn't hurt to tell people, like, I fucked up, I missed that, my bad. And I think maybe the first year or so he was like that. And then after that, it was like, it was never his fault. So I don't know. We also don't know the workings of what exactly happens in these drills and these practices. So we don't know why sometimes Slay was always like the one that kind of got the bad rap. But I don't go as far as to say I miss him at this point. I feel like, whatever he does in Pittsburgh is good for Pittsburgh. We'll see him anyway because we always play Pittsburgh. So I just feel like at some point you have to kind of just let things go. I do miss CJ, but I'm sure he'll do well as he can for the Texans. It's never going to be the same. I mean, it's just like when the Phillies let go of Cliffley and brought him back. It's just he was never the same guy. So maybe the second time around for CJ really wasn't. That was more for him to win the chip with them, but it wasn't for a long-term situation, which is sad. But again, sometimes you look back at that and say maybe Howie knew something we didn't. I mean, the obvious thing is to be mad about the fact that CJ was mouthy. I mean, I always thought he was kind of immature too on Twitter and stuff, but at the end of the day, his fieriness made sense on the field. Outside off the field, I mean, it was annoying, but you don't have to follow somebody you find annoying. You can just cheer for them when they're doing good on the field. But moving on to the obvious stuff, offense wise, my Goddard, Dallas Goddard, congratulations. Him and his girlfriend are having a baby in January. and I think his birthday's in January. So congratulations to both, even though I ain't gonna lie, I felt a little sad, but then I also was happy for her because she was very happy. So hey, I'm still gonna love me some Goddard. Um, but yeah, at this point now, I'm kind of like, well, obviously, if they're already married or they're gonna be married, it's probably coming soon. So happy for them, and he'll be a great father because he seems like a very, very good dude in general, which is why I had a crush on him because I always felt like he was a sweet guy. Um, but Goddard was doing his thing, you know what I mean? He was being present. The AJ situation with him actually only getting one catch, I'm sure was just based on the fact that timing again was off. Now, sometimes the whole thing with him not getting the catches sometimes were either way the coordinator designed the first half, and then also missed opportunities by the time Jalen had the opportunity to throw and he wasn't ready. So it could be a lot of that. There could have been he been open, but that also could have been the moment when the O line was having issues. So the O line was also causing a lot of movage up there. So Jalen was jumpy a couple times, but I think Jalen's decision making was crisper than it's been in a while, even more crisp than last season. And I think that sometimes AJ is just going to have to accept the fact that, if I don't see you, I don't see you. I'm sorry. It's never intentional. Um, you know, like I said, Devonta had his catches, but he was never near the end zone. Um, the dot to Dotson was crazy. Like it was so on point. And that kid, when he does come in, when he gets his one or two catches, he makes them count. So I think what AJ, even he said in his presser, I think he just has to realize like that's just how it shook out. But I got to be ready when I do get my catch because it's going to be, it's going to be the best catch of the night. So, and Jalen gave him a shout out and said, "I'm glad that he was available when he was available because that was the whole point. Like I know he's always ready, but when the opportunity was open, is he really 100% ready? All day he is. And he was ready for that one catch because it made a difference in advancing, the last part of the series. So I do think that sometimes you getting one or two catches does not mean that Jalen's interpreting like I can't throw to you. Sometimes I do think as a fan when I'm watching, like they must not be open by the time he's ready to throw. And that very much could be it. Or it could be designed for a next series that ends up actually throwing somebody else open, and then he has to skip over AJ and throw to Dotson. So it could just be the way it is. I mean, I'm also still waiting to see how Mechie's going to blend in with the wide receivers because there's going to be times where, they may decide to get off with Devonta or AJ and pay their attention to Mechie or pay attention to Dotson. So it kind of helps that sometimes some nights you just don't get the star players getting the star catches because Dallas is not dumb enough to just let AJ be open all the time. But also, you have to realize then you got to watch Devonta. Then you got to watch Saquon. There's other attentions that they have to pay to some of the players. They have to respect every single player. And sometimes you can't always focus on just two players. Sometimes you got to make sure you close off the main star so that everybody else can run around and you just hope to catch them. So there are going to be some games like this. They're not going to be sexy. The fact that Hurts got back-to-back touchdowns showed me that, okay, either these wide receivers are either not getting separation, Dallas is on their ass pretty good, or, again, timing. And again, we've been frustrated with that for years with Hurts, and I think it was more obvious in the past that sometimes he wasn't seeing folks. But I think he was very decided where he wanted to throw the ball last night, and I felt like he was actually taking the time to view the field. Where I felt like a lot of people were saying he doesn't do his progressions well. I felt like he was doing that a lot last night. So I think that's why some of the analysts I heard were giving him so much praise because they already saw that development in his eyes and where they were supposed to be. So if AJ did get overlooked, it was just timing. And another fan has pointed out, and many fans on Twitter have pointed out something that's very obvious as well. AJ has not been having a lot of practice because he's been rehabbing his hamstring and staying off his legs. So that obviously will disrupt the rhythm as well. And I also thought too that straight up, maybe he's still not healed fully and he's just taking it light. And so maybe his timing was off and that's why Hurts never found him. You have to think of all those factors before you get mad and start thinking like, here we go, AJ's about to be mad. Not necessarily. I mean, AJ's been supposedly he's born again. He's been basically, I mean, he's probably always been a Christian as far as I'm concerned. I know that I liked him when he was even on the Titans because he was talking about mental health. But I know he's been very demonstrative in the off season about, preaching the word and preaching to guys, about getting themselves together mentally and physically and spiritually. So I do think he's trying to turn another page in his career where I'm not going to be the headline because I'm not getting my way. Um, I think it was just one thing to see him reading on the sidelines, but I think he's also just learning. Like he's got this little boy now, and he's recommitting or age now. So I think his whole life is starting to kind of get to the point where his career now has to mirror his happiness off the field. So I think he's just trying to stay aligned, stay sane. Now, granted, there's going to be games where I'm sure he's going to be pissed, and they're going to be waiting to see for a reaction. But just like I said earlier with Jalen Carter, y'all have to realize now every freaking thing you do has a target on it. So past behavior, past blowups, everything's going to come back, and they're going to flip that clip as soon as you start tripping. And yes, it's hard. I mean, today I had a little snap situation with my coworkers, my older coworkers, because they were all getting on my nerves. And sometimes you have to remember, like, they're not trying to. That's just how they are. And this is just one particular day for some reason where it just irked me extra. And I have to remember sometimes, like, how you say things can come back to you. And I think every player after last night realized that the rivalry crap and all that stuff eventually started to create a bad vibe. And I think they were scattered. There were a lot of unnecessary fights in the first half because I think obviously Cowboys were trying to instigate more ejections, which didn't work, thank God, because it turned out to be two of those penalties went on Dallas players and not Eagles players. But there were also 10 total penalties, I think, maybe even 12 by the end of the night. It was a long night because with that weather delay, I thought they were just going to shut the game down because I figured if they're already ahead by 4 and it looks like they're not getting any better as the game went on, because, the delay, I just felt like they should have shut that shit down early, but they didn't. So whatever. I'm just glad we won. I do think next week will be another step in the right direction. It's just going to look different. That game with the Chiefs might be close just because now everyone's got them on video, and the Chiefs know what they have to expose. They could try some cheap shots too, to try to get a lot of penalties going. But hopefully, you're not dumb enough to be that obvious to not do it how the Cowboys just did it, because refs can sniff that out too. Some call it, some don't. But when you're not home, some of those bogus calls can come back out of nowhere just because. So I don't expect the Chiefs game to be any neater, but I do expect the O line and the D line to not look as uh, uneven. I don't think that Dickerson will play next week, but I have a feeling they're going to probably start some other players in his place. And I do think the D line will obviously have Carter back. And if not, they're going to have to make a lot of exceptions. Maybe, I don't know, who knows, maybe Darius Smith will even start in this game coming up, or maybe he'll wait for another week. But you never know. I mean, if he feels ready and if he feels like he could get a few reps in there, and if he's in the rotation, you never know. They may pull out Darius. They may pull some of the guys that were inactive last weekend, see how they hold up with the Chiefs, because the thing that really suffocated the Chiefs in this Super Bowl game was the depth of the D line. And most of those guys are no longer there. I mean, Big Fred's back, but Big Fred can't do everything. I think his height is an advantage, but a lot of those things, Moro Ojimo may have another day. You never know. I mean, Moro was definitely fierce, but most of that was because of Milton. And Milton is a Patriot now. So we wish we had him still, but I can't pay everybody, even though Joshua wasn't always a factor consistently, his hair was on fire a lot last year before he left. So now that he's on the Cardinals, I'm sure he'll be thinking of the team once they have that rematch next week. But they got all week to heal mentally, emotionally. Cowboys did bang them around a lot, which is to be expected. And I'm sure the guys were exhausted after that game. But I do feel like as a fan, we have to also be mindful that being the first game of the year, emotions were heightened with or without the banner situation. I do think that a lot of that played into the factor of some of the restlessness and the unfocused actions. I'm just glad that Hurts just continued to lead, because at this point he's like, I don't know what the fuck y'all doing, But me and Saquon, we on the same page. Him and Saquon were basically like, y'all can have these gaps all you want. We're gonna make do. I mean, Saquon still got free, even though he didn't like he did get that one touchdown. But I think just like when the Chiefs game where they kind of blocked a lot of his lanes, I think, he's starting to get schemed at more. So he's gonna have to be creative too. And I like how they're going between him and Will Shipley. Now Shipley had a rib injury, so I don't know if even Shipley's gonna be a factor. They may be using who else is still here? Because Gainwell is now in Pittsburgh. I'm trying to think of the other running back. It'll come to me, I'm sure, when we do the CoEd edition. I'm blanking right now. But either way, if they don't have Shipley back, Shipley going back and forth between him and Saquon, it's definitely going to be a wide receiver party next weekend. But I wouldn't be shocked if they pull another one of the guys that they still kept on rotation. And just throw him in every now and then just to throw the Chiefs off. Because I don't think, obviously, Saquon will not be doing every single freaking rep, especially not for the Chiefs game. So, but tonight the Chiefs are playing in Sao Paulo. So hopefully I'll get to see how good they look because they should have all their dogs ready. Cheers to a win, regardless. As you can see in my cup here. Cheers. Oh, wait, let me turn it. Shout out to PHLY. I think that's where I got it from. And if not, I'm sorry. It was another shop. I can't remember. I'll forget. But cheers to a win. Victory tastes great. Now, just a side note, it was a very Philly night. It was a very big celebration pre-game. My girl Lauren Talise, beautiful voice. You got disrespected with the audio. Even though I know you can sing and I could tell by the end you were very Jill Scott vibe performing, but baby girl, we didn't hear you. But I'm so glad you represented, and I hope they give you another chance to sing again, maybe in the halftime. I don't know. Boys to Men, not the best. Again, probably an audio situation, but I don't know if it was Wanye. I don't know if it was Sean, but somebody was way the fuck off. And y'all know better. But whatever. Still Philly, still keeping it real. I love it. And all the preliminary stuff, with Brandon Graham coming out with the trophy with Lori. They kept it short and sweet, whereas the first one, I think they had more of a longer delivery with alumni out there. But yeah, for the first game, let's be honest. I mean, any veterans or any alumni who came, there was a lot of people who were there to see the Eagles, rebound from a very productive year and hopefully not fall too much on their face. And for the most part, compared to how the game was after 2017's team won, which was a hot freaking mess, I think that the Eagles actually got themselves together at the right time in the second half. But yeah, the first half was a hot ass mess. And I feel like flags were just flying just to fly. I think that refs were on edge. I think they called a lot of bullshit calls, but I also think some calls were probably justified. But it was too many penalties, definitely, for the first half. So hopefully they don't start getting into stupid stuff next week. But just know, again, they have a target on their back. So anytime they feel like they're getting gunned for or targeted, just know it's because you are the returning Super Bowl winner. So they're going to find any way to shortchange you while you're on the field. So just be smart. Yeah, so the halftime first, basically the warm-up pregame show was, I had an issue with the audio, but again, I don't know how it sounded in the link. I just know when on TV it sounded like hot ass. So I'm sorry, because anybody who was singing that night probably sounds 10 times better in person, but they didn't sound good that night. But hey, it doesn't really matter because at this point it's just for the world to know that Philly is still going to live off of that high of the Super Bowl win for most of the season until they start looking like the team that won that Super Bowl all the way through. But there's going to be a lot of failure, this year as a result, should I say, of the missing pieces that helped win that Super Bowl. And that's every year. Every year there's so many players, which I still stand by. I don't like the way that Howie does it sometimes where you can't just keep majority of your core. But at the same time, it works out for the guys who know they're probably on their last contract. So if they want to get their money, they got to get elsewhere. So he just lets them go. But we'll see what Zadarius Smith turns out to be like. I hope that he gels. I hope that he serves a very good purpose on the team. Still curious about if the Justin Simmons thing is a reality, although at this point, I feel like, um, what do you call it? Our rookie, Jahad Campbell, did very well. He blocked a very important down the field pass. He just was very present and very hyped at that. So I think that he definitely proved that he has a lot to show, and it's just the surface. So that's encouraging. And then, you have to consider him and Zach Vaughn. Zach Vaughn chasing down our former running back Miles Sanders, who had a chance to steal uh, a deep ball run and managed to fumble the ball anyway, because that's exactly what his problem was here, holding the ball while he's in coverage. I mean, while he's getting tackled. So Zach Vaughn saved that touchdown from happening. So that was great. And Zach Vaughn just being Zach Vaughn. I mean, whether or not he had as many stats as he normally gets, you have to understand again, they got everything on tape now. So now you're not going to see as many blow up stats for everybody like it used to be. Um, but yes, I do feel like, and let's talk about the picks that never were picked. I mean, Dak pretty much gave them like 10, and nobody came up with any of them. They never bounced their way, or they just didn't extend at the right time. But I am glad that Quinion was able to get that fumble. But that was also a gift from Miles. So they didn't really earn any picks last night. So they got to definitely be present for that from this week on. Um, and yes, I agree that Quinion Mitchell got to work on his hands. And I'm sure Slay is going to be on a podcast talking about that because that's his OG. So I'm sure he's running him ragged on Texas or whatever, talking about it. But before I end this pod, I just want to say that I'm glad football is back. No doubt. When I return with the CoEd Edition, I'm not sure if Eddie feels like over the weekend, but most likely either Monday or Tuesday, we'll do a quick pod and talk about the game. I'm sure he's probably has no voice anyway because he probably was out last night. I chose to stay home because I didn't want to deal with driving home at night after I'd had a few, which is the mature thing to do, but it's never stopped me before. But I just didn't really even feel like it. I'd rather be out on a Sunday, and my birthday is the 21st. So the weekend they're playing in LA versus the Rams. I most likely will make a point to go out and maybe have a brunch with some people if they feel like it or available. And if not, I'm just going to take myself out. So yeah, so I feel like at this point now we are starting to see what the Eagles are going to be dealing with as the weeks go on. And I'm excited. I don't feel like the whole team is falling apart. I just feel like there's definitely holes that they got to figure out. And if they never fill them, they're going to have to learn ways to overcompensate for them because guys are going to be injured. There are some vets that are just always probably going to have nagging injuries no matter what. So they just have to learn to recoup better. Sometimes it just takes longer for, an O-line to kind of gel once that missing piece is gone out of nowhere. I mean, they threw the whole game off, let's be honest. I mean, I think that's why Jalen Carter's still being talked about today. Still, even at the end of the freaking day after, people are still dragging this boy's name through the mud. And even though he owned up and apologized, yeah, he didn't really apologize. He just basically said it won't happen again. I think he feels like he reacted like anybody would, but he wasn't understanding the situation. And because obviously, like anything in high school, you're the one who got caught, even though you were probably baited. He got baited. And there was a couple of players who got baited too. So they'll learn, because any other past time they've been on this team in the past couple of years, that's probably happened before and they didn't bite. So I don't know what changed this year, but some guys just got knocked off their stoop and now they know to be better. So just be better. That's it. That's all. I don't watch the Phillies games anymore because I'm on cable. So half the time I'm just looking at clips. So all I can say is I hope they continue to stay on top. And even though I know that I heard there's another pitcher injured, we obviously know Wheeler's out. And hopefully Nola, if he's not back on injured reserve, can pull it together before the end of the regular season so they can go into Red October. I still kind of predict they might reach 100 games, but I'm pushing it because I don't think they're even at 90 wins yet. But they even got to like 95 by the end of the season, I'd be happy. Because I feel like no matter what they've had to overcome this year, and I know there's been issues with Castellanos and being taken out of the field, and whether there's a beef between him and the manager, I don't know. But there are a lot of like sub stories that are starting to develop on this team that weren't there last year. So I don't know if maybe the growing pains of the older team is starting to wane on the manager. I don't think the coach needs to be fired. I don't think he's the problem. Maybe I agree that sometimes maybe the lineup may be a little weird sometimes when I've watched in the past, but I know that I think he's the least of their problems. I think there's a lot of vets who are on long contracts who are not consistent. And even the guys that they brought in, how long are they going to stay, productive if you have a whole team that's starting to slowly break down? Even though Bryce is getting back into his form, you have to consider Trey's now started getting hot, but also Trey's had some head scratching moments. What's his name? Uh, Bohm has still had his little fits that he has. Apparently, he's just always going to be that kind of a kid. And then you've just had other issues, obviously, with the bullpen. I mean, Ranger hasn't been totally Ranger, but I heard he's getting back into form. A lot of guys have had to battle through a lot of injuries, and then you also just have to deal with the mental stress of 162 games. So there's not going to be a day where the Phillies aren't going to blow a whole series and then come back and sweep another one. So this kind of season is like this, topsy turvy. I know them front office guys and Don Broski are stressed on a daily basis because they realize like nothing is easy with this team. Um, Philly front offices all should be stressed, even on the Eagles, because any given Sunday something changes, or any given day something may change injury wise or money wise. So, and as we know with the Sixers, again, like the Phillies, they're gonna be stuck with most of the same roster. So you can't really expect so many more improvements when they can't put the money out to get the players they need to get. Contracts are extended too long. They might have extended Embiid too long, but we're not going to even go there because that'll be for when October comes. So wait till then. But sidebar, Maxie tweeting about being a Cowboys fan was only just a troll, but I didn't even respond to it. I just laughed because I was just like, you know what you're doing, boy. You're trying to put yourself out there and stay relevant, but ain't nobody got beef with Maxie, who's a human being, because that boy is as harmless as hell. But I do wish that Embiid and them could actually surprise the world and actually be present for all of the season. But you know, I'm not in their bodies. I can't make him and Paul George just magically be free of injury for the rest of their career. But um, they need a better bench. And, Maxey just needs to be the star that he seems like he's destined to be, because he's a good kid. And I think that he deserves any success that comes his way. Unfortunately, it may not always be here in Philly, you know? But we'll see. We'll see what happens, to be continued. All right. If you're still watching this far, thank you for watching Solo Birds of a Feather. We'll be back with Birds of a Feather, the CoEd Edition, when it drops. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye bye. Go Birds.